The Great Hall of the alien empire was filled with light that did not come from fire nor from the sun, but from glowing crystals floating in the air. They shimmered in colors no human eye had ever seen before. At the center of this massive hall stood the golden throne, so large that it looked like a mountain shaped by kings, and on it sat the most powerful being in the galaxy, the Emperor. He was tall, with skin like polished silver and eyes that shined like cold stars. His voice could shake the walls, and his laughter could make even the bravest warriors bow their heads. Today that laughter echoed loudly across the hall. In front of him, chained and trembling, stood creatures from many different worlds, scholars, scientists, and linguists. All of them had been brought here for one reason. Floating in the air before the Emperor was a small, glowing cube. It looked simple, but everyone in that room knew it was not. Strange symbols moved across its surface, shifting and rearranging themselves like they were alive. "This," the Emperor said, his voice deep and proud, "is a message from beyond our known universe. It appeared at the edge of our galaxy, and none of you can read it." He leaned forward, smiling. "I will give all my gold, all my treasures to anyone who can translate it." The room was silent. One by one, the greatest minds stepped forward. A tall being with blue skin tried first. He studied the cube, his hands shaking as he whispered calculations. After a few minutes, he stepped back, defeated. I cannot understand it, my Emperor." Another stepped forward, a machine intelligence, its body made of metal and light. It scanned the cube, processing millions of possibilities in seconds. "Error," it said finally. "Language structure unknown." The Emperor's smile grew wider. More tried, more failed. Hours passed, days passed. The cube remained a mystery. The Emperor leaned back, bored now. "Is there no one in my entire empire who can solve this?" he asked, his voice now filled with disappointment. No one answered. At the far end of the hall, near the massive doors, a small figure quietly pushed a cleaning cart. He wore simple gray clothes, and his head was down as he wiped the shining floor. No one noticed him. No one ever did. He was human. His name was Aaron. Aaron had been taken from Earth many years ago, not as a warrior, not as a scientist, but as a janitor. In this empire, humans were considered weak, simple, and unimportant. They were given the lowest jobs, the ones no one else wanted. Aaron had learned to stay quiet, to stay invisible. But today, something felt different. As he cleaned near the edge of the hall, his eyes slowly moved toward the glowing cube. At first, it was just curiosity, but then his heart skipped a beat. The symbols, they looked strange, but also familiar. He frowned, wiping his hands on his cloth. "No, that's not possible," he whispered to himself. He tried to ignore it, tried to keep working, but the feeling wouldn't go away. The Emperor stood up again, clearly losing his patience. "Enough," he shouted. "If no one can translate this, then it is useless to me." He raised his hand, ready to destroy the cube. "Wait!" The voice was soft, but it cut through the silence like a blade. Every head turned. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. "Who spoke?" he demanded. Aaron froze. He hadn't meant to speak. It just came out. Slowly, nervously, he stepped forward. The guards immediately raised their weapons. "A human?" one of them scoffed. "Stay back, dirt cleaner." But Aaron kept walking. I think I can try," he said, his voice shaking. For a moment there was silence, then the Emperor laughed, a loud, powerful, mocking laugh that filled the entire hall. "You?" he said, pointing at Aaron. "A janitor? You think you can do what the greatest minds in my empire could not?" The crowd joined in the laughter. Arin felt his face burn with embarrassment. His hands trembled. Every part of him wanted to run, to go back to being invisible. But something inside him refused. I just want to try, he said quietly. The Emperor wiped a tear of laughter from his eye. Very well, he said with a grin. This should be entertaining. He waved his hand. Let the human come closer. The guards stepped aside, though they clearly did not like it. Arin walked slowly toward the center of the hall. Each step felt heavier than the last. Thousands of eyes were watching him, judging him, mocking him. He reached the floating cube. Up close, the symbols were even clearer. His breath caught. Because now he was sure. He had seen something like this before. Not in space, not in books, but at home, on Earth. His mind raced back to his childhood, sitting in a small room, his mother teaching him old, forgotten languages, stories, symbols, ancient texts that most people didn't care about anymore. This one, she had said once, pointing to a strange symbol, is from a very old language. No one really knows where it came from. Arin had laughed back then, but now... His hands slowly reached toward the cube. The symbols shifted as if reacting to him. The entire hall went quiet. Even the Emperor leaned forward, curious now. Arin closed his eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. Okay, he whispered to himself. Let's see if I'm right. He opened his eyes and spoke. At first, his voice was unsure. Then, slowly, it became steady. It says, he began. The symbols on the cube started glowing brighter. Gasps filled the room. It says, to the ones who seek power without understanding? The Emperor's smile disappeared. Arin continued, you have found this message, but you are not ready for what comes next. The cube pulsed with light. The walls of the hall began to shake. The guards stepped back in fear, and for the first time, the Emperor did not laugh. Arin swallowed hard. There was more, a lot more, and somehow, he knew that whatever he said next would change everything. The glowing cube pulsed in Arin's hands, brighter than before, as if it had been waiting for someone like him. The entire hall stood frozen. No one laughed now, no one moved. The Emperor slowly rose from his throne, his sharp eyes locked onto the human janitor who, just moments ago, had been invisible. Continue, the Emperor said, his voice no longer mocking, but serious. Arin's throat felt dry. His heart pounded loudly in his chest. Every instinct inside him told him to stop, to stay quiet, to step back, but he couldn't. The symbols were no longer just shapes, they were words, clear, alive, almost speaking to him. He took a deep breath and continued, you have built empires on silence. Arin read slowly. You have taken worlds without listening to their voices. A low murmur spread across the hall. The Emperor's expression hardened. Arin hesitated for a moment, but the cube pulsed again, urging him forward. But the universe remembers, and it answers in time. Suddenly, the lights in the hall flickered. The floating crystals dimmed. A deep vibration filled the ground beneath their feet. The guards tightened their grip on their weapons. What is this? One of them whispered. The Emperor raised his hand, silencing everyone. His eyes never left Arin. Finish it. Arin nodded nervously. There's more, he said. He stepped closer to the cube, his fingers lightly touching its surface. The moment he did, the symbols changed. Faster now, almost urgently. It's not just a message, Arin said, his voice trembling. It's a warning. The room fell completely silent again. A warning? The Emperor repeated, his tone dark. Arin swallowed. Yes. He looked at the cube again, focusing. This is not a gift, he read. It is a test. The Emperor's jaw tightened. Arin continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. Only those who understand the smallest voices can survive what is coming. A cold chill ran through the hall. Some of the alien scholars stepped back, fear clearly visible on their faces. "What does that mean?" one of them asked, but Aaron didn't answer. He was still reading. "The strong will fall first, the proud will fall hardest." The Emperor's hand clenched into a fist. "Enough riddles," he snapped. "Get to the point." Aaron flinched, but the cube reacted immediately, its light flaring so brightly that everyone had to shield their eyes. Then, in a voice that was no longer entirely his own, Aaron spoke the next line. "When the silence breaks, the forgotten will rise." A sudden shockwave burst from the cube. The ground cracked. The massive doors at the end of the hall slammed shut on their own. The guards stumbled, struggling to stay on their feet. "What is happening?" one of them shouted. The Emperor stepped down from his throne now, no longer calm. "Control it," he ordered Aaron. I don't know how," Aaron replied, panic rising in his voice. The cube began spinning slowly in the air, lifting itself out of Aaron's hands. The symbols were no longer just glowing, they were burning like tiny stars. Then something even more terrifying happened. A voice, not Aaron's, not the Emperor's, something deeper, older. It echoed through the hall, not from one place, but from everywhere at once. "Translation accepted." Everyone froze. The Emperor looked around, his eyes wide for the first time. "Who dares speak in my hall?" he demanded. The voice ignored him. "Evaluation? Complete." Aaron's heart raced. What is this?" he whispered. The cube suddenly expanded, unfolding into a larger shape, its smooth surface breaking into layers of shifting light. A massive symbol appeared in the air above it. No one understood it, except Aaron. His eyes widened in horror. "No," he whispered. "That's not—" "What is it?" the Emperor demanded sharply. Aaron stepped back, shaking his head. It's a mark," he said. "A judgment mark." The entire hall grew colder. "Judgment?" one of the scholars repeated in fear. The voice returned. "Civilization? Assessed." The symbol above the cube split into two halves, one glowing white, the other dark as night. "Outcome. Pending." The Emperor's fear quickly turned into anger. "I am the ruler of this galaxy," he shouted. "No one judges me." He raised his hand, summoning a weapon made of pure energy. "I will destroy this thing myself." "No!" Aaron shouted, stepping forward. "You can't!" But it was too late. The Emperor fired. A blast of blinding light shot toward the cube and vanished, just disappeared, like it had never existed. The hall fell silent again. The Emperor stared in disbelief. "That's impossible." The voice spoke again. Hostility detected. The dark half of the symbol began to grow. Penalty increased. The ground shook violently now. Cracks spread across the floor. From those cracks, a faint light began to rise, like something was waking up beneath them. Panic spread through the hall. "Emperor, we need to leave," a guard shouted, but the doors would not open. The Emperor turned to Arin, his voice no longer filled with pride, but with urgency. "Human," he said, "you started this. You will fix it." Arin shook his head, fear in his eyes. "I didn't start this," he said quietly. "You did, when you stopped listening." The Emperor froze. For a moment, those words hit harder than any weapon. Arin turned back to the cube. "There's still more," he said. The voice inside him was clearer now, not controlling him, but guiding him. "The test is simple," Arin continued, reading the final part. "Will you listen, or will you fall?" The white half of the symbol flickered weakly. The dark half continued to grow. The emperor looked around at his people, his empire. For the first time, he saw not power but fear. "What do we do?" one of the scholars whispered. Aaron took a deep breath. He didn't feel like a janitor anymore, but he didn't feel powerful either, just responsible. "We listen," he said softly. The emperor looked at him. "A human telling me how to rule?" he said bitterly. Aaron met his gaze. "No," he said, "just someone who was ignored for too long." The ground shook again. The light from below grew stronger. Time was running out. The emperor clenched his fists. Everything he believed in, everything he had built, stood on one choice: pride or understanding. Slowly, painfully, the emperor lowered his weapon. The hall went still. The dark symbol stopped growing. The white light flickered, just a little brighter. The voice spoke one final time. "Final decision in progress." Aaron held his breath, because he knew this wasn't just about an empire anymore. This was about something much bigger, something that could either destroy them all or change them forever. The hall stood on the edge of silence, not the peaceful kind, but the kind that comes just before everything changes. The glowing symbol above the cube trembled, half white, half dark, like it was deciding the fate of an entire galaxy. The cracks in the floor continued to spread, thin lines of light rising from beneath, pulsing like a heartbeat. Every eye was on the emperor. Every breath was held. Aaron stood still, his hands shaking slightly, but his eyes steady. He had said what needed to be said. Now, the choice was no longer his. The emperor, ruler of countless worlds, conqueror of civilizations, slowly lowered his head. For the first time in his life, he hesitated. All his power, all his victories, all his pride, none of it mattered in this moment. The voice, the cube, the judgment, they did not care about strength. They cared about something he had never valued before: listening. The emperor looked around the hall. He saw fear in the faces of his guards, confusion in the scholars, and then he looked at Aaron, a human, a janitor, the lowest in his empire, and yet the only one who understood. The emperor took a slow step forward, then another. The massive hall echoed with the sound of his footsteps as he walked down from his throne, not as a ruler towering above all, but as someone stepping into the unknown. "What must I do?" he asked. His voice was quieter now, not weak, but different. Aaron swallowed. He hadn't expected that, not from someone like him. "You have to listen," Aaron said again, gently this time. "Not just hear, but truly listen." "To what?" the emperor asked. Aaron looked around. "To them," he said, pointing to the people in the hall. "To the ones you conquered, the ones you silenced, the ones you never gave a voice." A heavy silence filled the room. The emperor's jaw tightened. Those words were harder than any battle, but something inside him had already begun to change. Slowly, he turned to the crowd. "You," he said, pointing to one of the alien scholars who had tried and failed earlier. "Speak." The scholar froze. Me?" he stammered. "Yes," the emperor said. "Say what you were afraid to say before." The scholar hesitated, looking around nervously. For years, speaking honestly meant punishment. But now, the emperor stood waiting. Finally, the scholar took a deep breath. We are afraid of you," he admitted. The room went still. The guards shifted uncomfortably, but the emperor did not react with anger. He just listened. Another voice spoke up. "You never cared about understanding us," said a creature with glowing blue eyes, "only controlling us." Then another. "And now we're all going to die because of it." The words were sharp, painful, honest, Aaron watched closely. This was the moment. The emperor could still choose pride. He could still silence them all. But instead, he closed his eyes and listened, really listened. Each word hit him like a weight. Every truth he had ignored, every voice he had crushed, it all came rushing back. When he opened his eyes again, they were different. Not cold, not distant, but aware. He began, his voice heavy. I did not see it. No one spoke. I believed strength was enough. He continued. I believed fear was control. He looked at his hands, but I was wrong. The moment those words left his mouth, the white half of the symbol above the cube flared brightly. The dark half began to shrink. The cracks in the ground stopped spreading. The rising light beneath them softened. The voice returned. Shift detected. Everyone looked up. Understanding. Acknowledged. The emperor took a deep breath. Then, slowly, he did something no one in that hall had ever seen before. He bowed. Not to a king, not to a god, but to his people. Gasps filled the hall. Even the guards lowered their weapons in shock. I have ruled without hearing you, the emperor said. That ends now. The white light grew stronger. The dark side of the symbol almost disappeared. Aaron felt a warmth spread through his chest. Hope. For the first time since he had been taken from Earth, real hope. The voice spoke again. Final decision. Complete. The cube stopped spinning. The light stabilized. Then, slowly, the massive symbol above them shattered into thousands of tiny particles, like stars breaking apart. Judgment passed. A wave of energy spread through the hall, but this time, it wasn't destructive. It was calm, gentle, healing. The cracks in the floor sealed themselves. The walls stopped shaking. The doors slowly opened. The danger was gone. Silence filled the hall once more, but now it was peaceful. The emperor looked around, almost in disbelief. We survived, one of the guards whispered. No, Aaron said softly. We changed. The emperor turned to him. For a moment, neither spoke. Then the emperor stepped forward and did something even more surprising. He knelt in front of Aaron. The entire hall gasped again. You, the emperor said quietly, you saved us? Aaron shook his head. No, he replied. You did when you chose to listen. The emperor looked at him for a long moment. Then he stood. From this day forward, he gosna loudly, his voice echoing through the hall, this empire will not be ruled by fear but by understanding. He turned to the guards. Remove the chains, free them all. The guards hesitated for only a second, then obeyed. Chains fell, barriers lifted. For the first time, the empire felt different. The emperor then looked back at Aaron. What is your name? He asked. Aaron, he replied. The emperor nodded. Aaron of Earth, he said. You are no longer a janitor. The hall grew quiet again. You are the voice of the empire. Aaron's eyes widened. I'm not a leader, he said quickly. You are, the emperor replied, because you listen. The words settled deeply, not just in Aaron, but in everyone. The forgotten had been heard, and in that moment, the weakest voice in the galaxy became the strongest, far beyond the hall, beyond the empire, beyond the stars themselves. Something ancient watched, and for the first time in a very long time, it was satisfied.